Insecurity in parts of West Africa and the Sahel region has been one of the drawbacks of development in the region for a long time now, leading to poverty and economic deprivation among the people, particularly the vulnerable groups of women and children. The ECOWAS stabilization program for affected areas was evaluated in Abuja recently and now ready to restore hope to the affected areas. Now this week, edition of the program will focus on how to ensure stability and security in the region, especially the role of local communities. And I am Charles Alpha, welcoming you to Africa Weekly. The ECOWAS stabilization program for insecurity-ravaged communities in West Africa and the Sahel is primarily aimed at strengthening the resilience of the people to enable them respond to the impact of insecurity in the areas. Now, the program will focus on human security as the pivot of all security initiatives.
In recent years, the West Africa and Sahel regions have experienced several challenges that pose risk to their stability and development. Recurring incidents of coup d'etat and terrorist attacks have become a cause for concern, leading to a rising state of instability in the affected countries. This phenomenon has adversely affected political and socio-economic development, with vulnerable groups such as women, youth and children bearing the brunt. Since 2017, the Lake Chad Basin Commission and the UNDP have been test-running the Regional Strategy for Stabilization program in the affected member states. This workshop is to evaluate the pilot intervention strategies and adopt a framework anchored on the new way of working, which emphasized a whole-of-society approach where everybody will play a part.
We have conducted sensitization missions across all the 4 affected countries and strategic partners to secure their buy-in.
I see that between now and another 3 years, we would almost have an envelope of 50 million euros to be divided amongst the 3 countries. Eventually, other countries will come on board.
Issues of funds application to most critical aspects of the implementation of the stabilization program were also analyzed, with focus on human development and peace building.
Now, joining us to analyze this issue is Ambassador Joshua Wale Oshatimehi. He is the Commander General, Nigerian Hunters and Forest Security Services. Ambassador, we're glad to have you on Africa Weekly.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here once again.
All right, good to see you too. Now, can you tell us the current state of insecurity in many parts of West Africa, including Nigeria?
You know, Nigeria is bordered with a lot of foreign countries, at least terrestrially, I mean on the land, we are bordered with about 4 countries. In terms of maritime, Nigeria is also bordered with about 3 countries. When we are talking about maritime, we are talking about Equatorial Guinea, Sao Tome and Ghana. When you are talking about the land border, we are talking about the Chad, Cameroon, Benin Republic, and Niger. All these border countries, the reason why Nigeria insecurity now is on the high side, there was no border security shake-up. So there is a lot of influence of illegal immigrants that are coming to our country through the porous border. Yeah, the state of insecurity generally in the world is really disturbing, most importantly in Africa. And Nigeria as a case study. I think what needs to be done is the leadership of the concerned country, the leaders, I mean the president, like the Nigeria president, Chad president, Benin, Cameroon, those people that share border, they should work interrelatedly. There should be interconnectivity in their operation, because what affects one affects others. There should be a limit or a law or an agency should be created to manage this unprotected space or government forests. When you look at this issue of insecurity, 80% of it happen in our forests and in the bushes. For example, when they kidnap, they take it to the forest. If the bandit operate in the forest, they have made forests to be the safe haven for their hideout to perpetrate their evil deed. So the leadership of those countries should form an agency that will serve as forest security. Just like when you are going from Canada to Mexico, there's a forest marshal. When you are going from Mexico to America, there is forest marshal. Those are the people that look into the forest security. And in Nigeria, for example, we have army, we have police, we have DSS, we have civil defense, we have other security agencies. All of them, they work in the cities. But look at the rural villages. Some are displaced. Some farmers cannot go to farms because the security structures in the city is already overwhelmed.
All right.
And at the detriment of the local villages.
Okay.
I think that is the only solution.
Okay,
the community need to come together and support the government on intelligent gathering and surveillance.
Okay, now, so now that you talk about the rural, area and the rural community, now what role do you think local community, can play in intelligence gathering in helping security agencies, tackle the issue of insecurity that we're facing in Nigeria and West Africa?
Yes, sir. Like what our organization stands for, Nigeria's Hunter and Forest Security Service, is to complement the effort of conventional security agencies. Before the passage of our bill, we have been rendering ancillary services to the community to support the constituted authority by giving them intelligent information and as a surveillance in some of the community. So we still need more from the government. How do I mean? Before the passage, we have been doing all we could for the past 6 years when this idea was mooted for Hunter to be incorporated into National Security Service in Nigeria. But now the passage has been done. We are soliciting, begging on the federal government to give speedy assent. That's why we can be empowered by law to carry out our constitutional duty. Because in most cases, whenever we come across these bandits, these criminals in the forest, we are being challenged because we lack the constitutional backup for us to make arrests and send to the appropriate court for prosecution.
Now, Nigeria is to benefit from the $1.5 billion set aside by the African Development Bank to avert food crisis on the continent. The president of the bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, stated this to President Muhammadu Buhari when he granted the AFDP president audience in the State House, Abuja, Nigeria.
Yeah, welcome home.
How are you? Thank you, sir.
Since the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war, the African Development Bank has been working hard to insulate Africa from its negative consequences, especially on food security. The president of the bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, is here to brief President Muhammadu Buhari on steps taken so far towards averting food crisis on the continent now and in the foreseeable future. The Nigerian leader thanked the African Development Bank for its timely intervention, which he described as not only appropriate but a fitting response to the crisis. This, he said, clearly shows that the African Development Bank knows the weaknesses and strength of Africa and at all times planning and working ahead. The president said his administration in particular has done a lot towards achieving food security and will therefore support any effort aimed at ensuring sustainability. Dr. Akinwumi Adesina said the Russia-Ukraine war would surely create global problems, particularly for Africa, which imports a huge percentage of its food from the two countries. Already, he explained, the price of wheat has gone up by about 60%, and indications are that there would be fertilizer deficit of nearly 2 million metric tons, which will affect food production by about 20%. Dr. Adesina also estimated that Africa will lose about $11 billion worth of food, and coming shortly after COVID-19, that will be rather serious. And to prepare against the evil day, the African Development Bank has developed a $1.5 billion Africa Emergency Food Plan, which is now before the bank's board for approval to avert food crisis on the continent and mitigate the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war. For Nigeria in particular, Dr. Adesina said at least 5 million smallholder farmers would be helped to produce 9.5 million metric tons of food.
Now, countries along Sudan, Savannah, and the Sahel region will this year experience flooding and early cessation of rainfall that will be accompanied by dry spell this year. This is part of the findings of weather forecasters from 17 countries who converge on Abuja to analyze the weather condition of the region. Africa, not accessing United Nations climate support funds, was also tabled at the meeting.
Of climate change.
There was a commitment by the United Nations and other developed countries to set aside $100 billion annually to assist developing countries mitigate climate change.
What we absolutely have to do during
this decision was made in 2019 at COP15 in Copenhagen, Denmark, where it was decided that developing countries that are contributing less to the global warming should be supported. Investigation reveals that since the pronouncement, non-African countries was able to access the fund.
The negotiators are getting their eyes more shined, and as it is, a lot of efforts are being put to access these funds to address issues of climate change.
The dwindling rainfall, flooding and drought in the Sudan Savannah Belt and the Sahel region are attributed to the climate change. Data generated by these forecasters from 17 countries indicate that rainy season in the region this year will be early, but with short duration.
We are expecting to have short dry spell, both at the beginning of the rainy seasons, but also by the end of the rainy seasons.
With all the efforts that we have made, if these results do not get down to the last mile communities, those who need it the most, I'm afraid we are wasting resources.
The forum is created to be providing and analyzing weather-related data with a view to assisting communities mitigate climate change.
The added information from this forum will likewise assist NEMA in ensuring all states and communities vulnerable to flood receive the warning through community engagement.
The one-week event was hosted by Nigeria under the auspices of the Nigeria Meteorological Agency, NIMED.
Now I'll take you to Zambia now, where that country is making lots of effort to inject new blood into its civil service structure.
I wish to inform the general public that the district health officers and provincial health officers across the country have received an overwhelming response. Central Province, 11,354. Eastern Copperbelt Province, 19,778. Eastern Province, 9,232. Luapula, 7,013. Lusaka, 21,301. Muchinga, 5,918. Northwestern, 7,781. Northern Province, 8,428. Southern Province, 13,269. Western Province, 7,703. Grand total, 109,777 applications.
To Kenya now, where Raila Odinga meets constituency for Africa group in US. Azimio La Umoja, One Kenya coalition party. Presidential flag bearer Raila Odinga has pledged to focus on the country's economy.
Azimio La Umoja presidential aspirant Raila Odinga started his US tour on Saturday last week, where he has been holding a series of meetings with senior US government officials. Speaking while addressing a meeting of Constituency for Africa group that seeks to shape America's policy for Africa in Washington, D.C., Odinga vowed to end corruption if elected president in the August polls.
One of the major impediments to investment in Africa has been some factors which include, for example, infrastructure, poor infrastructure, high cost of energy, bureaucratic red tape, corruption. Some of inhibiting factors that have hindered investment in the continent of Africa. We are going to address those issues so that we can create a very attractive environment, new environment, for people to come and invest in the continent.
The ODM leader saying his focus will be lowering the cost of living for Kenyans.
We are open. I've started with Kenya. We are inviting you people to come, the African diaspora, to come to Africa and invest in Africa. You're welcome. In terms of Africa, it's the same. Africa is the same. We are discussing ways and means of opening up Africa for trade. So we have got historical connection. The United States helped Kenya in the struggle for independence from British colonialism. So we therefore share very many things in common. And we want to see that these relationships are strengthened. So we are saying we want to, of Kenya, we are starting a new chapter in Kenya after the elections of 9th of August this year.
Odinga is set to visit the State Department and the White House, where he will hold meetings with the country's Assistant Secretary of State for Africa and members of the Congress. Raila was expected to be at the United States for a week, cut short his tour, and is expected in the country on Wednesday ahead of the burial of the former president, Mwai Kibaki.
Kenyans from all walks of life thronged parliaments to view the body of the late President Mwai Kibaki that is lying in state. Parliament's gates were opened at 8 a.m. to enable members of the public pay homage to the late president.
6:46 a.m. at the Parliament buildings. The casket bearing the remains of former President Mwai Kibaki arrives for day 2 of public viewing. Moments later, Kenyans started streaming into the Parliament buildings to pay their last respects to the third president of Kenya. The young and the old all were here in one accord. Kenyans eulogizing the late former president as a selfless leader and whose leadership style is worth emulating. Others mourned him as an accommodating leader whose #1 agenda was country economic development.
He was focused, and I think we owe it to him to make sure we don't disappoint. We owe it to him, some of us who are canvassing for votes and asking that, making big promises as we are being told on the circuit, to make sure that our promises, we deliver on our promises. And Kenya will never be the same again, because once upon a time, Mwai Kibaki was president of Kenya. I'm very proud, and I'm also sad.
In the Departmental Committee of Finance and Trade, I was able to relate a lot with the president in terms of budgetary allocations and implementation of the same.
Kibaki loved Kenya. Kibaki was always for Wanjiku, the person bottom up. You know, he never thought of himself as the most important thing in this country.
The retired president's body will be in Parliament for one more day for public viewing. The National Mass is slated for Friday 29th at the Nyayo National Stadium.
Now, Kenya is to hold a state burial for its late former leader, Mwai Kibaki, credited with the courageous initiatives that set Kenya on the path of progress. Kenya will hold a state funeral next week for former President Mwai Kibaki, who led the East African nation for more than a decade. Kibaki, who died at age 90, served as the country's third president from December 2002 to April 2013. Taking over from the authoritarian rule of Daniel Arap Moi. Kibaki, whose political career dated back to the birth of independent Kenya, will be buried next Saturday at his home in Othaya in the Nyeri Highland. Condolences poured in from Kenya politicians, African leaders, the African Union, and former colonial ruler Britain when Kibaki's death was announced on Friday. His rule saw the most violent election in Kenya's history, when more than 1,100 people died in ethnic battles after disputed 2007 polls. But he also oversaw the adoption of a new constitution with reforms aimed at preventing such unrest. Kibaki left a legacy of strong growth in the regional economic powerhouse, launching major infrastructure projects and boosting the struggling health and education sectors. The cause of death was not officially disclosed, but his health had fluctuated since a serious car accident in 2002, and he had been in and out of hospital. President Uhuru Kenyatta, who hailed his predecessor as the gentleman of Kenya politics, has ordered a period of national mourning until sunset next Saturday.
We have lost a hero. He was a father to the nation, an economist who has revived this country and has put in place strategies that have seen this country where it has come from.
Kutupea elimu ya bure watoto wakasoma, zile mambo yenye ametufanyia wakati alikuwa president, ningeomba wale mapresident wenye wanaingia wafanye vile yeye alikuwa anafanya. Mahali aliwaachia waendelee na hizo shughuli zenye alikuwa nazo.
Alikuwa mzee mzuri, hata maisha venye sasa imekuwa ngumu, alikuwa akirudisha uchumi chini. Sasa saa hii tuko na shida sana. Tunaombeleza, lakini tunamweka Mungu amweke mahali pema peponi.
And that's our package this week on Africa Weekly. Many thanks for watching. I am Charles Alpha.